This is day one of the build for the AI NPC game. And based on the comments so far, it looks like the shaping is the name that we're giving this game. So by the end of today, we intend to actually have this deployed. Now the whole game won't be functional today, but we will have a waitlist sign up page already out there, and we'll have the front end and back end scaffolding and modules deployed and built and ready to build on top of it starting on day two. So I'm going to use three separate prompts, and then of course at a certain point I'll need to go out and set up the hosting environment out on the live hosting site. So let's look at the first prompt here. In this first prompt, we're basically going to create the Git repo and build the scaffolding for both the React front end and the Node back end. And remember, we're starting with a WPA. I'm sorry, with a PWA version. So it's a web-based version that will very much behave similar to a native app on your phone. You can even add it to your home screen. And then once we get the entire project functioning end to end, then we will go back and we will create a native app that will still talk to the existing backend. So in prompt number one, we're just building out the React front end that will become the PWA version, and the Node backend, which will perpetuate through the life of the game. Okay, so the prompt basically instructs Cursor, which is the IDE that we're using, the development environment, that it's to act like a senior full stack developer, and we are building day one or episode one of a build in public game project. Okay, so the current state. I've created the folder on my local system called the shaping. Cursor's already got the folder open, and we want to build everything inside this existing root. So we're going to go with a mono repo, right? Just one repository. So we want Cursor to create that repo. Notice it lists the front end and the back end and the components there. And then we want ultimately for it to work end to end locally, and then by the end of today we will deploy it to Firebase, which is going to be the hosting environment we use, and we'll also use that for authentication. It's just a all-in-one kind of solution. Later, depending on how much use it gets, the back end, we could move it to another platform to scale faster, but we're going to go with Firebase for now. So the basic rules that we have is keep it simple and clean. We are going to leverage TypeScript on the front end. We want to use plain Node and Express on the back. And we do not want to build the waitlist in this prompt. That's going to be prompt 2. And we do not want to add Firebase yet. That's prompt 3. So we're just trying to make sure that Cursor doesn't get ahead of itself. Also, we're going to add a minimal hello world UI to verify it's running. Next, we're identifying what we want the structure to be inside of the repo. So the folder structure that we intend. Now, it would do this on its own. You don't really have to tell it, but if you want to control the naming of these things, then you need to tell it. So everything's going to start at that folder that we saw early on in the prompt, line 7 up there, the shaping. That folder exists. I already have it open in Cursor, and we're going to have it create an apps folder and a web folder inside of that, and then a services folder and an API folder inside of that. Of course, the package.json file, the readme.md file, and the gitignore are all going to be in the root. And then the steps that we want it to take, and this is the order we'd like to go in. We want to initialize the Git repo in the current folder. So this is going to let us have version control. We want to create the web app in the apps web folder, and that's where we're going to use Vite, React, and TypeScript. Then we're going to create the API service or the backend in the services API folder using Node and Express. We're going to add a root level package.json file, and it lists out the commands that it's going to provide there, which basically is going to get the entire web app up and running. And then the web app should run on, and we specify the ports. So the front end is going to be on port 5173 and the back end on 8787. Now, of course, once this gets deployed to Firebase, these things will change. And then we want to add a test API route to make sure that the backend is responding, that we can test it with. You see there, get health should return these things. Step 8 in the web app, we want to add a minimal page that shows these things, right? The title, the subtitle, and then if we go to the health API endpoint, we want to see that the API is online or offline. Step 9 is we want to add the appropriate paths into the get ignore. So we don't want everything getting stored in version control, just the stuff that we and AI cursor are coding. And then a short README file that gives me some instructions, or whoever we pass the code on to, some instructions about how to install it, run it, and the ports being used. Then at the bottom, there's just a few notes, right? So implementation notes. We want to use concurrently at the root to run both services. We'll enable cores in the API for the local dev. And we want to keep the styling minimal. We want to keep it all centered as far as the layout. As far as terminal automation, we do want cursor to execute these terminal commands. So we'll do a npm install at the root and in the web folder front end and in the API backend folder as well. And then the run dev can happen at the root, which will run all the projects at the same time. At the end of all of this, we should be able to run those commands you'll see listed below there and verify everything's working by going to those specific URLs. Now, all of this at the end of prompt 1 will just be running locally on my system, and then by prompt 3 today we will push it out to Firebase and it will be live. So let's go ahead and copy this, and we'll flip over here to cursor. Again, I've already opened up the folder, the shaping. Other than that, it's a new cursor instance. I'm pasting in the prompt exactly as we went through and pressing enter. So what's going to happen is it's going to assess what's going on, it's going to read the prompt, it's going to search to see if certain things already exist, and then it's going to start building. And you can see here, it shows me what it's doing as it goes. It's going to, or it is building the package.json file, indicating the different aspects of the build and the structure. It's populating the get ignore, knowing like where the bits are that it wants to keep versions of and where it should exclude the versioning. It's already building the readme.md. And then here, it's telling me that it can run this command to build out the things that it needs. So it kind of is listing all this stuff out ahead of time. Notice here the front end apps. So it's really showing me all of this way ahead of time. So basically it outlined it. So cursor has, it wasn't building those right now on the fly, but it did basically build them, and it's telling me all the things it's going to do in each step that we itemized. This verification section, after running npm run dev, you should see these things. You're in ask mode, so I can't create these files or run these commands. Switch to agent mode if you want me to create them automatically or create them using the code above. So we definitely want it to create them. We do not want to be in ask mode. And so this little drop down right here, this is ask mode. We're going to go to agent mode. And then I'm going to say, please perform all of these tasks and steps for me. Great. Okay. So the first thing that it's doing is making sure it's in the right directory, and then it's running this git init. So this sets up version control within the folder and creates what we call a git repository. This is how we keep versions as we change the code. Now it is actively creating and writing these files as it proposed. You can see over here on the left, you can see the folders and the files actually begin appearing. To be honest, I'm not sure a moment ago how I got into ask mode. I must have selected that when I opened the environment unintentionally. But we want to be in agent mode. So it has built all of these pieces, added them to the appropriate files, and then here is trying to run a new command, which is this npm install in the root folder. And we talked about this. This is one of the things we instructed it to do. By running that, we now see this node modules folder appear in the root. It's going to do it again in the apps web folder, right? So here's the apps folder. There's a web folder underneath that. And then these are all already here, meaning Cursor has built those. Now when I run this, you're going to see it's going to install npm there, and we get another node modules folder here. And then finally, it's running that same command on the services API folder right here. So again, you don't see a node modules folder underneath the API folder yet. I'm going to click run. It's executing that. So Cursor will prompt you every time it wants to execute something on your local system. Now, if it's just writing code to a file that's not running a command yet, then it doesn't ask. It just keeps moving. But anytime it's going to actually execute something on the local system, it's going to prompt you. You can skip it or run it. So here we are. It's going to the root folder, and it's going to execute the command npm run dev. And so this is what it's wanting to launch here, this local host. I'm just going to copy that. We could let it open it itself, but I want it opened over here. I do not want it opened inside the Cursor interface because I want them running side by side. So I copied and pasted it. So that's the local host and the port that we told it about. Notice the shaping is the title like we intended. Hello World EP1 is the subtitle, and then it did check the health URL, and it was successful, so we got API Online. It's asking to run a curl command. This is how it will check the health itself. Instead of me just seeing the API Online, it's basically running the command, and it will get the results. See the OK true service API, and it says that's all good. And then it's going to run this to check basically the main page to make sure it gets a 200. So basically it has verified that both services are running. The backend, the API, that was the health URL that it ran, and also the front end. That's where it got the 200 response, which is a standard successful response on a web page. And now it has given me the sort of the rundown after the setup has been completed. So the root package has been created, the front end and the back end, the get ignore, the services that are running on the front end and back end, it lists those out here. verification things that it checked, right? The API health endpoint for the back end, that it got a positive 200 response, successful. Both services are running. What you'll see if I open this page with that port, which I did, then I get to see all the things you expect, right? The title, the subtitle, API is online. And it tells me kind of what it's doing. So we can stop it by doing a Control C in the terminal, restart it by rerunning this run dev command. So it's basically done. We have completed prompt 1. We have created both the front end and the back end folders, as well as placed React in the front end and Node in the back end. And we've committed all of that to Git repo. We've created our first API endpoint that gives us this API online. So all of this was quick and easy. Wrote out all the code and is ready to run. So now we will want to commit these changes to our version history, and then we will also want to move on to the second prompt. So I'm going to click this little terminal menu and say new terminal, and you're going to see it pop up right down here. And then I'm going to say get status, and it shows me here, although they're untracked right now, these do have changes. So I'm going to type in get add space period. And now what that has done, here I'll click later on that, what this has done is now added all of these where they will be saved, although they're not saved yet, but it says, hey, here are all the changes, and these, technically it's called staged. They're ready to be committed into the repo. So now I would do a git commit space -m space and then put a message, first commit, and that's, something simple like that is what we usually do on the first one, because we just want to be able to roll back to that initial commit. So there you go. And if I ran get status at the end of that, you would see where on the main branch there's nothing to commit because it's all been committed. It's clean. Okay, so that's awesome. So now we'll want to move on to the second prompt. To prompt 2, day 1 of building the shaping. So in prompt 2, we're going to, we already have the scaffolding, and we're going to build out the waitlist page and the appropriate API endpoints for that. Again, the prompt just starts with what we have, right? We already have our repo. It tells the folders and what's in each folder, basically. Our goal is to build the day 1 waitlist experience, a single waitlist page, an API endpoint to accept those email submissions, basic validation, friendly interface, store submissions in memory for now. No Firebase yet. That's in prompt 3. So right now, it's not saving those anywhere, but it will when we get to the end of the day. The rules, again, keep it clean and minimal. No Auth yet, no Firestore or Firebase yet. Must work locally end-to-end. And then prevent obvious spam. So, we don't want garbage emails. Page content. Create a single page. The home page is fine. Headline's going to say the shaping. The subtitle, if you will, is going to say a psychological AI game where you chat with one shared NPC and thousands of players influence its future. Then an email input has a placeholder. The button says join the waitlist. Small text below that button, beta access is limited, no spam. And then for the UI behavior, the button is disabled unless the email looks valid. On the submit, we're going to show like a submitting message. On success, we're going to say you're on the wait list. Welcome to the shaping. If there's an error, we got to give it an error message. Something went wrong. We have the API we want to call. Now, we could have let it make these decisions, but we are, controlling it. So we want the endpoint to actually be waitlist. endpoint, some basic stuff there. So down here below that, behavior, we want it to validate the request body as an email, right? So we want to make sure it is structured like a valid email. And then normalize the email to lowercase. We want to trim it in case they've put extra spaces. And of course, it talks a little bit about returning the JSON, like what's the messaging that's going to happen. In-memory storage is what's happening right now. Of course, it's temporary. It's just going to store the signups in memory. We do want to prevent duplicates, right? So if the same email comes in twice, we can give it a message that says you've already joined. We're going to log each new entry. We have error responses, 400 for invalid email, 429 if we hit a rate limit. I don't think we're going to do that. 500, of course, is the typical unexpected, basically system error, if you will, or server error. For the development UX, we want to add a small dev-only section to the web page, and we want to show the API URL and the last response. Those will go away when we take it live. After implementing all of these things, we want to run these commands, and then we want to submit a valid email and invalid email, the same email twice. Basically test it. Okay, so it's pretty straightforward and simple. I'm going to paste it here. Again, just copied and pasted the prompt, didn't add anything, and then we're going to press enter. So it is planning its next moves, right? So it's reviewing the code that it already wrote, and of course the prompt that we submitted. And now it is updating the app TSX. So it is basically updating what the front end will look like. Whereas before on the front end, if you remember, well, it's already made some changes. Before we just had the title, a quick subtitle, and then we had that API is online. So you can see there, it keeps reshaping it and reforming it. You saw it auto update right before your eyes. I didn't touch any buttons for that to happen. It's literally writing the code here on the left. So like I said, it updated the app.tsx file. It has updated the app CSS file, which is the style sheet. That's when you saw it had all the right components, but they weren't styled and looking nice. And then the index.js file, it updated here, which is the main file for the backend that runs the API. So here in this command, it is calling the Waitlist API endpoint, and basically it's seeing if it gets the right response. Seems to indicate that the API server is still running the old code, so it's going to restart the services to pick up the changes. Great. So what you saw was it basically killed off the old running processes that were already running for the front end and back end, and now it's going to relaunch them with this run dev command. I'm not going to have it open that because that will open it here in the left portion of the window in cursor. It already is open over here. It's going to run this test again. Great, it got okay true. That's what we wanted. So here it's going to, looks like, run another test. It's another scenario. Got a 400 on that one. So it's an invalid email format. It's going to run another test here. This one used a duplicate email, so one that's already been submitted. It says you're already on the list. Okay, then it ran another valid email. Now it's just checking that the front end is up and live. So all these tests that it did, those first 3 tests where it was putting an email in, make sure it got it okay, putting an invalid email, got an error, put a duplicate email, got an error. All of those were a direct test to the back end, not going through the front end. And then it did a check on the front end to make sure that it was up and running and live. So here at the end of this, the waitlist feature is complete. it tells me all the things that it's done, right? The front end, the apps web folder, has the waitlist page with the headline and the subheadline, email input with validation, join the waitlist button, which you can see here, loading state, success message, error handling, and a dev-only section down there at the bottom. The backend, it details what it's done there. It handles the email validation and normalization, rate limiting. It's currently at 5 requests per minute per IP address. So it doesn't mean only 5 people can sign up per minute. It means that you can't have 5 new emails submitted from the same internet address, basically the same computer, within a minute, right? Somebody's trying to mess with you. So, talks about the error responses there, and then testing results. That it tested all these things that we saw it do. What to test in the browser. So this is suggesting what we do, right? So we could enter an email. Notice that this is disabled here because there's no valid email address in the box. So that's something that we want. That's something we expected and asked for in our prompt. So notice when I put in a valid structured email address, it shows join the waitlist. Then I can click it. It submitted it. It says you're on the list. Welcome to the shaping. If I use the same one and I click join the waitlist, interesting. So here it says you're on the list. Welcome to the shaping. I don't see the error message that I expected. So I'm going to tell it from the front end, when I attempt to add the same email twice, I do not see any message that indicates I'm already on the list. Instead, I get the typical success message. You're on the list. Welcome to the shaping. All right, let's see what it does with this, right? So what it should do, and what it typically does, is it starts to check things out. Notice it tells us that the backend returns OK, true, for duplicates with the message, but the front end isn't displaying it, updating the front end to show the backend message when present. So then it's reading the app TSX, which is the front end, the file that drives the front end. Now, below that it says updating the front end to use the backend message when present instead of always showing the default success message. So it's updated some code. This shows that it added 9 lines and took away 3. Checking for linting errors, right? So it's just making sure that the syntax is all correct and everything. It found the issue. The front end should now check and basically present the correct message. Changes should hot reload. So I'm going to go ahead and just refresh. Now, it is possible. Oh, look there. You're already on the wait list. That's great. So it fixed it pretty quick. The other thing here is if I were to do that, of course, join the list is gone. So anyway, now the only thing I don't really love about this is the look, right? Like it just being white background. And while I want to keep it simple, I still think it should sort of emote, convey the same feeling as the game. So we need to think about what we want to do to bring that to life. Now, we could use the mock-up that we have of the game interface. Um, we could just use a more generic picture in the background. So I want to think about that for a minute, and then I'll resume the video and we'll execute on finishing the waitlist page with the correct look and feel. Decided that I want to use the mock-up of the game UI, and we still want to keep this mobile friendly. So wrote a prompt 2.5 to use between prompt 2 and prompt 3. And we're going to drop the image into our scaffolding structure, to our folder structure. Notice where I'm going to put it. It's in web source assets. I'll call it UI-mock. So over here, if you look under the source folder, there is no assets folder. So with a little right click, a new folder, assets, pretty easy there. And then I'm just going to drag this in. There it is. I'm going to rename it. There we go, UI.mock. Okay, so this is the same mock-up image that I've been using to kind of like promote this. Great, so I'll close that. Come back over here to the prompt. Let's just read through it real quick. So notice I tell it that we've already built the waitlist page, and where it lives in the folder structure, that we just want to update the visuals so it feels like the game. The goal is to replace the plain white background with dark, more atmospheric look. We want to add the UI mockup image as a hero visual, so that'll be at the top. Keep it mobile first and clean. Do not change the waitlist API logic at all. Keep it the same. I'm telling it where the image is. Below it here, the requirements. The page layout, mobile first. Full page background should be dark gradient. Center content in a single column, good spacing, content ordered. The UI mock hero image, right? Keep it responsive. The headline, the shaping, the one-line hook, email input, and then the disclaimer at the bottom about beta access is limited. Style rules, talk about it being a dark card and panel behind the form area. Give it some settings there, background, border, blur effects if possible, rounded corners. Talks about how the text is light and gray, but readable. Button should have a subtle glow. Input should match the theme. Desktop layout on larger screens, keep it centered, not too wide. Do not force a two-column layout. Add a tiny status line somewhere, and then the waitlist is live. Confirm it still works, so that it'll test everything at the end. All right, so this is basically just trying to spruce it up. All right, I'm going to flip over here so we can kind of watch it as it does its work. So it says that it read the prompt, says it's going to upgrade the waitlist page. Notice how it is adding the mockup to the app TSX file. Okay, boom, that was quick. Scroll down, there you go. Now it's changing the styling. Okay, it's pretty good. Don't like all of it yet, but it's not done. So it's still modifying the CSS. Okay, that's a little better. I am liking that better. Okay, so now it's wanting to test things. So I'm going to go ahead and let it run the tests. Then we can discuss whether we really like that blue background or not. Okay, so it's done. I honestly am not sure how I feel about the blue background considering there's such a large black border around that mock-up image. Now we can modify the image so it's cut in very, very close to the phone in the image. We could also consider redoing it so that the background is basically black instead of that blue. Which I think might be better. Well, I'm going to take off that last bit. So all I'm really going to do is ask it to make the change about the back, make it more gradient black, so it blends in better. Let's see what happens there. So it really understood what I was asking as far as its response, and I do think that looks better already. I kind of wish the area for putting in your email was highlighted a little better. How can we better highlight the area around the email text box button and success message since everything since the background is all black now. Maybe brighten the border for the box that's around it a little more. Now you can be very specific. Like if we knew the colors we wanted, we could just give it to, you can give like a hex color, which is a 6-digit hexadecimal number, to indicate this is the color I want, or you can be, just much more specific in your description. Here, I'm really not too particular, but I do want it highlighted, and I think this highlights fairly well here. Okay, I think that's really good. I'm curious what the button looks like when it has a correct email address in here. I think the blue is probably fine. It somewhat matches the blue send button in the app. So it's probably okay. Okay, I think that's good. I think we ship that. So here we go. This is what we were looking for. We've not seen it on a phone yet, so we'll see how that looks. But um, this does look really, really good. And um, the next piece of this would be setting up Firebase, and then of course hooking this into Firebase and then pushing it to Firebase, which also will mean the join the waitlist, those emails will become persistent, and we'll be able to contact those people when we are ready to launch, right? So, all right, I will see you in just a minute. I basically pause between the prompts just to kind of set it up, but I'll be recording everything that I do. So I guess really in this next little segment, we will be going out to Firebase and setting up Firebase, and then we'll be running prompt 3. We're going to have to set up Firebase now to host this. We're keeping it super minimal right now. Of course, it will expand into authentication and everything else. There'll probably be many parts of this section of the video where I have to black out or blur out pieces because it's in my actual Firebase account. But I basically went to firebase.google.com. This is what comes up. If you don't have an account, then you'll have to sign up and create one. I already have one, so not a big deal. Once you're here, you want to go over to go to console. Great. So we're going to get started by setting up a Firebase project. What is the project name? The Shaping. Isn't that nice? Good. Accept. Perfect. Okay, so since I already have a Google Cloud presence, it's defaulting to that, and that will become the project's parent organization, where I can control, permissions, access, and everything else. And then I'm going to continue. Enable Google Analytics for the project. I think that's just fine. That's fine. It's going to automatically create a new property for this account. And the property is basically how Google Analytics tracks data. It groups it by the properties. So okay, it says the project is ready. I'm going to hit continue. All right. Great. So now what I want to do is expand build here. And I'm going to start with the Firestore database because we have to have somewhere to store the email addresses. Great. And I want to create the database. I think we'll just do standard edition. Simple query engine with automatic indexing. Yeah, I think that's great. Close that little pop-up. Yeah, that's fine. 5's fine. We're going to start in production mode. I don't really see a reason to go through a test mode right now with what we're doing. It's pretty simple and straightforward. I'll hit create. Okay, so it's up and running for the database. And I'm going to go back to build, and I'm going to come down here to functions. And let's see. Okay, we have to upgrade the project. Pay as you go. Yeah, okay. So the selected plan is pay as you go. To be able to do this, I have to upgrade to a billing account. So I'm going to limit it to $25. Great. Okay. Now let's see. Let's go to hosting. Get started. Okay, so this is kind of where the more detailed stuff starts to happen. So to host your site with Firebase Hosting, you'll need the Firebase CLI. It's a command line tool, of course. So I'm copying that. And I'm going to put it right down here. And we're just running it in the terminal at the root level. Notice it says the shaping here. You can see that it's executing. You got these little circles going, or little dots, I should say. Okay. So let's see, it completed. Okay, we'll skip this for now. So here it wants me to initiate the project. So I'm going to come over here. Now it doesn't tell me to do this part, but I'm going to go ahead and just run the version and see what we've got down here. Now Firebase login, see what happens. Okay, so now it prompted me over here to finish logging in. Great. So I close that window. It says I'm logged in over here. That's wonderful news. Then it wants me to run Firebase init. I guess I could do projects list. Great. One total projects. That's the one we want. Okay, so Firebase init. Okay, so you can just use the arrow key to scroll up and down through this. So I'm going to want to enable Firestore. Hold on, okay, it's rotating through. I'm sorry, I wasn't sure. Firestore, functions, and then hosting. Yeah, I think that's everything. Let's see. You can create multiple project aliases. No. I think the existing project is what we want. Yep. Firestore security rules allow you to define how and when to allow requests. You can keep these rules. Firestore rules thinks fine. I think that's fine. I'm just taking the defaults on these file names. Quota exceeded. Let's do this in hosting. Let's skip the functions. Now, since we're using Vite as part of React, this is the default output folder for Vite. So I'm gonna pick that. But right now, because we're in development, we're gonna say no. Okay. Great. Okay, so now that we have it initialized, notice that it says when you're ready, do Firebase deploy. Now we're not going to do that until prompt 3. But what we have now is Firebase Hosting is set up and ready for us to push out our initial page. This is the third prompt. We've set up the Firebase Hosting, and let's review the prompt real quick. And then this should, by the end of this prompt section, we should have the site out and live where people can get to it and get on the wait list and so on. So up here at the top, again, we are just reiterating what we already have, right? So we're React sets and Node sets and the wait list now, it talks to the API. Our goal in this one is to deploy the project to Firebase, right? So we want the React web app to be live on Firebase Hosting. The API endpoint is deployed as Firebase Cloud Functions. The waitlist submissions are stored in Firestore, so they persist, right? We can pull them out later. And the web app calls the deployed API, not our local. The local dev, of course, will still work. So we want to keep it simple, as always. No authentication yet, which means no Moniker I'll explain that later. It's basically like usernames. No AI yet, right? We're not embedding AI yet for the NPC. Of course, do not expose any secret keys to the front end, and keep cores correct. So we don't want cores out in production. Okay, assumptions. So what I've already done outside of Cursor, I created the Firebase project, I enabled Firebase Store, and I installed the Firebase CLI and ran the Firebase login. We did all that already. Okay, so the tasks for this prompt, we want to install Firebase in the repo root. We actually did that already. That's okay. It'll figure it out. We want to set up the Firebase functions and the Firestore rules. And then we want to deploy that structure. So hosting, Firebase hosting should serve the output from Vite, which there's the folder, the apps web dist. The function should live in the functions folder. We want to implement the waitlist endpoint in our cloud functions. And we want to implement the get health in functions as well. And then Firestore is going to create a collection waitlist signups. Each document in that database should have the email when it was created, the source, which is going to be web for now, the user agent, if possible. It just tells what browser they're using, and then we'll hash the IP. And this helps us make sure they're not blasting us, where we have like a bot or something signing up a bunch of emails. Preventing duplicates, right? Use email as the document ID or query before inserting new ones. Update the front end to use this environment-based API URL. So in the local dev, we're using the 8787 port, but in production, we're going to use the Firebase functions. We'll use this environment variable to control that, and then we'll ensure that the UI still works locally. We want to do a hosting rewrite. So this is basically changing things as appropriate to make sure now it works live as opposed to just locally. Again, keeping cores local, Firebase deploy, getting everything out to Firebase is step 7, verification after we've deployed it, and then deploy if necessary. Of course, a net if not already done, which it has been done. However, we will need to add functions. So we'll see how it goes. Just going to copy and paste it here and run it. So notice it is checking the Firebase configuration. It's partially initialized. Notice it needs to set up the functions. So it's going to do that. That's wonderful. So it realized by looking at the Firebase JSON file that we had implemented hosting in Firestore, but we did not pull functions in because we had that quota limit exceeded when we first initialized Firebase. All right. We're going to run npm install in that functions folder. Okay, then we're going to run a build on the web folder. It's found some TypeScript errors, and it's going to fix those. Okay, so we're going to rerun the build. I found an unused variable. Running the build again. Okay, let's see what it did here. Another something is declared but not used. Use effect. Okay, so we're deploying. It's running Firebase and it's going to deploy functions, hosting, and Firestore rules. Okay, had to make some adjustments. Doing it again. Had a permissions issue. Okay, so it successfully deployed the hosting and the Firestore rules. The functions deployment has a permissions issue, so it's going to check a couple of things. Sure enough, pulls right up. That's nice.